The views and opinions expressed on Where Did the Road Go belong to the person speaking them. They do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of other people on the show or the show as a whole. This month's Where Did the Road Go is sponsored by the following amazing individuals: Greg Ross, Bill Illuminati, Allison Cook, Yvonne Williams, Super Inframan, 36 Dingo, and Michael Frisky. Thank you all for helping to make this show possible. And if you'd like to help out, become a patron at wheredidtheroadgo.com. It's only $3 a month for lots of extra content.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? And this is another sort of a missing 411 deep dive, but we're going to be dealing with a lot of stuff, I think, here that's not necessarily missing 411 stuff. My initial concept here was to kind of work our ways through the books, and we may do some of that today. I've done some of it prior to the show here to see what I could find, and just kind of update some of these cases. And I'm here with Saxon, Super Inframan.
Hello.
Williams. And Brennen Storr.
Hey, good to be back.
And but there were some other things that people have asked us to cover, and I found some other interesting stuff to cover, as well as looking at. I took the Western New York book and went to see if I could update some of the cases. And for the most part, the cases I was able to find, there wasn't really a lot of new information, so they're still weird cases. But we'll get to those. I don't think there was anything I found where I was like, oh, this clearly was not. There's no potential for this to be weird. You know what I mean? But a lot of them just never had any updates. And Brennan, you have the newspapers.com, so maybe you'll find something when we get to those, but I was not able to find anything new. And so a couple of the ones I looked at least remain odd, if nothing else. But let's talk about the M Cave and Kenny Veach, because someone wanted us to cover this. We mentioned it in passing a few times in the past. But we never deep dived to this. And Brennan, it sounds like you've done a lot of research on this.
Yeah, well, I wasn't familiar with the case prior to you mentioning it, so I did a dive into it. And basically, the idea seems to be that this Kenny Veach was a fellow who lived in Las Vegas. He liked to hike in the desert, and he was into alien stuff. He was into the idea of disclosure. He was a big fan of the Serious Disclosure YouTube channel. And so back in June 2014, they had posted a video on Serious Disclosure called Son of an Area 51 Technician. Now, as I understand it, based on my, sort of quickly checking around, Serious Disclosure is not around anymore.
Okay.
But this video, the idea was that this was someone who claimed to be the son of an Area 51 technician who had been told a bunch of super secret stuff by his dad when he was drunk. Now, Veach commented on that video, and he said, "This ain't nothing. I'm a long-distance hiker. One time during one of my hikes out by Nellis Air Force Base, I found a hidden cave. The entrance to the cave was shaped like a perfect capital M. I always enter every cave I find, but as I began to enter this particular cave, my whole body began to vibrate. The closer I got to the cave entrance, the worse the vibrating became. Suddenly, I became very scared and hightailed it out of there. That was one of the strangest things that ever happened to me." And this apparently set off a firestorm in the comments. One guy warned Veach, "Don't ever go back. You will not return." Veach asked him, "Why is that?" Of course, there was no answer because, spoiler, I think the guy, as a lot of people do online, was just talking nonsense. But this built and built and built. And so people were wanting... Oh, so go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, when I first heard this story, it sounded interesting, but it also sounded like bull. The idea of this cave and what people are assuming is infrasound that he experienced.
Yeah.
It's one of those things okay, well, it's not like that would be impossible for the government to build it. Well, why? What would that be? So, I mean, it does leave the possibility that it might have been a cave that had a military purpose, possibly.
Not impossible. but
It
also
seems very sci-fi-ish.
It does. So that's actually one of the things that I found more plausible out of everything. And I'll tell you why yes and why no towards the end and as we get through it. But if I were trying to put up a perimeter around something and I didn't want a fence out there, and I had the ability to put sound into the ground. Now, how that works, I don't know. But it sure does seem like a nice thing to have, like, kind of focused in different directions when you don't want to put up a fence or something like that. If you just make people feel really uneasy and sick to the point where they're like, I don't want to go that direction anymore.
Right.
So from a benign keep you out kind of way where I don't necessarily have to be out there. I don't have to worry about you trying to go through a wire fence out in the middle of the desert. It's like, okay, that's a really interesting discouragement that I don't have to always be out there to enforce or worry about too many people deciding to press on. So yeah, I'm definitely with you on, like, that's possible probably. And from a certain perspective, sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, but it seems to only have affected this cave, not like a fence area.
Well, and I think that's the problem. And, I will say we don't know what the cave structure is like out there. But, if you go to New Mexico, man, there are caves all over that place.
Mm-hmm.
And so say there is a cave that, some of the entrances could possibly come out, say the exits are within Nellis Air Force Base or Area 51 or anything like that. But the entrances are far, far away from the actual perimeter of the base. Do you go put a barrier inside that cave miles deep that lines up with the actual perimeter of the base? Or do you put something to keep people from entering them at all? But then, as Brennan will get to, they might have just blocked up the cave. So that sure sounds like an easy solution.
It also sounds like an easy way to, it sounds like a story that someone might make up, I guess is the thing.
It does. If I were, romanticizing Area 51 in my experience with it, or just making it up completely from a romantic perspective like that, you would put that in there.
Yeah. And people love tunnels, right? I mean, people love the idea of hidden cave systems underground, these things that go places that are mysterious and things like this. So I think, whether intentionally or not, I think he hit a bunch of different stuff that people just, probably intentionally because he's familiar with the material.
Right.
So he hit a bunch of points that are just, yes, these things will appeal to a particular, to guys like us who are fascinated by this stuff.
Right. If I was going to build a story, that's not a bad start to, like, a story, a podcast or a TV show or a movie or something. Like, oh, I found this M-shaped cave that I felt like I was vibrating when I went into. That seems like a good starting point,
Yeah, sure.
It also reminded me. Have you guys read the manga The Enigma of Amigara Fault?
No.
By Junji Ito?
I know the one you're talking about. Yes.
Yeah. So just quickly for Seriah, it's this idea that this cliff face is, I think, exposed after an earthquake, and it reveals these person-shaped holes, and it soon turns out that there is a hole in this cliff for every person on Earth.
Okay.
But you have to find your specific hole, and then you just disappear into the Earth. So it kind of vaguely brought that to mind for me.
Yeah,
me too. And I was thinking of oh gosh, who was the guy that claimed he got into the firefight with the aliens in one of the deep underground bases in New Mexico?
Yeah, I can't remember who it is. I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
Other people are yelling at us right now because we don't know his name.
Totally are.
So
okay,
go ahead,
I didn't mean
Brendan.
to derail us with that, but the vibration infrasound. I was like, actually, that's a cool idea.
yeah, totally. Go ahead, Brendan. Continue.
Okay, so basically from that point on, it sounds like a lot of folks were challenging him, wanting to say more. It's the internet, right? People will say whatever comes to their mind, and it's usually something terrible. So I think he was sort of goaded into going back out to look for this cave. So on October 18th of that year, again, 2014, he posts, I want to say 5 videos to YouTube, all on the same day. 3 of them revolve around selling various, I'm going to generously call them inventions. They barely qualify as that. And he's trying to pitch them to Shark Tank and something called Quirky, which I'm not familiar with. But 3 of the videos are just selling these very, very rickety. Again, it's kind of sad, honestly, given what happened to the man, and with some additional personal details that we'll get to in a moment. It's kind of sad. I don't want to make fun of him. It sucks. But then the 5th video the 4th video is him basically talking about trying to sell his house. And then finally, the 5th video is 20 minutes long, and he goes off in search of the M cave. Now, I think it's relevant to mention that among the things he said in the comments when he responded to people challenging him was that he is a skilled outdoorsman. He really knows his stuff. He liked to talk about how he'll go out there with almost nothing. He'll push himself as hard as he can. And in the M Cave video, he's very far out in the desert. It's hours just to hike out to, as I understand it, to the location where he was. And he claims to have brought only a chocolate bar and a little bit of water.
Yeah.
And he finds a bunch of pine nuts on the ground, and he's shoving these things down. So I think, this was not super wise. And in the video, I watched the whole thing. He, of course, never finds the M Cave. And it reminded me of when I read the book, the first edition of I think it's Jason Haxton's book about the Dybbuk box.
Don't know that one.
Okay, so Haxton was the guy who, I think he was the one who sold the Dybbuk box to Zach Bagans. I'm not 100% on that.
Okay.
But when the story broke big, Haxton was the guy who owned it. And he wrote a book about it. And what I think is hilarious is when I first got into the paranormal around 2012, his book was out of print, but they were making the movie about the Dybbuk box. So the lie was everywhere. The book, which had the truth of the story, was nowhere to be found. And so I found a copy, and basically Haxton bought it from the previous owner, and he tracked down the first guy to put it online, the one who claimed to have had this thing happen, and sort of the originator of the legend. And that guy claimed to have bought it from a family in his neighborhood. So Haxton actually contacted this dude, went out to visit him, and said, we need to find the people who sold it to you.
Right.
And eventually they drove around and around, and the guy claimed, I can't find it. The house is around here somewhere. I can't find it. And finally, in the end, he broke down and admitted he made the whole thing up. He built the Dybbuk box himself. He put everything in there that was in there. It was just a goof.
Yeah.
It was all a put on. It was not ancient. They had no history to it. It was just a goof.
Yeah.
But that part of the legend just at that time was not part of the wider story.
Sure.
But watching Veach walk around the desert trying to look for M Cave, it felt exactly like that.
And,
I see.
and if you found a cave like this in the first place, why wouldn't you at least take a picture?
That's it. And he was known for bringing his camera. He was often known for bringing his video camera out, a cell phone. And let's face it, even in 2014, those things had cameras.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you guys. I mean, you guys like hiking more than I do. But if I were to find something out in the boondocks that did that to me, I would remember where I found it.
Yes.
And so watching that video, I kind of thought, okay, he's doing the dance. He's doing the Dybbuk box dance. This thing's not real.
Yeah.
And people kind of went after him in the comments. And then on November 10th, he was last seen at a movie theater in Las Vegas. That night, he called his ex-girlfriend and basically said he's going hiking the next day. And that was the last anyone heard of him. On November 22nd, the Las Vegas police reported that his cell phone was found out in the desert near an abandoned vertical mine shaft. And as far as the story goes, in terms of developments, that is the last anyone has heard of Kenneth Veach. On December 9th, 2014, the National Missing Person Database, NamUs, they created a case, and again, that's as far as it's gone. There has been a little more information that's come to light, but I can go on to that in a second. I want to give you guys a chance to get in here.
Yeah, I've watched bits of his different videos, and where he brags about how he goes out with just a bottle of water and a chocolate bar. And if he's really doing the extreme hiking that he's talking about, it just sounds like an awful idea, even if you're able to, arguably find things out in the wilderness that you can eat, which, is questionable anyway, whether or not some of that stuff is a good idea or safe to eat. I've done a decent amount of hiking in national parks, and I'm in fairly good shape. I'm not a distance hiker by any means, but I find that so negligent and reckless the way he was doing that.
Yeah.
if he was really doing those things where he was just taking a bottle of water and what have you, he's lucky he didn't die sooner.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of insanity to me. And so that also kind of makes me wonder, even though some people retrace some of his footsteps, like to the mine shaft, I think, and some other things, still, like, I don't know if he was going as far as he said he was.
Yeah.
Because going back to, we're talking about the inventions, and then now I understand about the divot box. Like, I think that he may not have been, I don't want to say as smart, but he needed some love maybe in his life, and was just trying what he could to get some attention, very innocently, and trying to find a way to be an inventor. And those inventions were pretty pathetic. One of them was like a toilet paper roll holder. I mean, they weren't, life-changing things.
Yeah.
They were, just kind of like knickknacks almost. Anyway, I say all that to a lot of this just gives me the sense of like he fabricated a lot of things to get some attention, and then it got way bigger than he intended for it to.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. I think that's exactly what happened. I think he hit a vein. I think he was really desperate. Again, there's a little more information we'll talk about, and I think he saw this as a potential way out. But I don't think it was could never be what he needed it to be, and I think he was unable to capitalize even on the small amount of potential it represented, because he seemed like a sweet guy, but he wasn't very clever. I've known guys like him. I've had guys in my family like him, even a guy in my family who thought he was an inventor. A wonderful guy, just not an inventor.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And sorry if I jumped ahead with that, but
No.
There's just that recurring theme of like, I grew up in a little town, and just like you're talking about, Brennan, like, there's people that you've grown up with, you're related to, or whatever. And there was this really nice kid in town that we all knew who he was, and he was just very friendly and was harmless. Never hurt anybody or anything like that. But if you talk to him at the wrong time, he would just totally make up who he was and everything.
Yeah.
One day he told me he was like the punter for the Florida Gators, and was back home visiting from college. And he wasn't. I knew he was from town and where he lived, and his mother and his little sister and all those things.
Right.
But it felt like, that guy back home had to kind of tell you these things because he just didn't quite have a sense of worth, and some other things were going on with him. He wasn't a bad guy. He just was, he was who he was, I guess.
Right. Right.
I worked with a guy who among the many lies he told, this is probably the most spectacular one, and it kind of makes me die a little inside just out of like secondhand embarrassment. He claimed to be a musician. Mm-hmm. And one of the other guys I worked with was an elderly German fella who was the leader of the Alpenrose band. Oh, wow. And this guy claimed to be a drummer. And the German fella, Richard, he said, well, we need a drummer. Great. And in that particularly dramatic fashion, he said, well, you will come to practice, and we'll see how it goes. This guy didn't play drums, but
my gosh,
he went.
Oh gosh.
And I don't know if he thought like God was just going to choose him, or, he was hoping the spirit of John Bonham was just cruising by, but he sat there and he hit the drum kit, but he very clearly had no rhythm, did not know how any of it worked, and then just kind of shrugged and went on with his day. It just didn't really affect him.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's interesting when you see stuff like that happen, and they just act like they've always known to, and it was fine, and they just, are unbothered by it.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you'll see them go to great lengths to convince themselves why they couldn't play that day, or whatever it was that they were trying to do. Yeah. Anyway. Okay. Sorry. I didn't want to derail us too much.
No. So basically, Seriah, did you want me to go into the sort of the additional light his girlfriend shed on him?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So basically, shortly after this all came out, basically, a woman who identified herself as his girlfriend, a woman named Sharon Pilgrim, was commenting on, I believe it was actually on Kenny's video where he tried to go back to the M cave. And she says, I didn't realize until today that there were comments on this hiking video. I am Kenny's girlfriend, he mentioned in the video. We went on many wonderful hikes together in our Nevada desert. Many of the hikes were 8 or 9 hours long, and we always took beautiful pictures. Kenny left for an overnight hike in the same area on Monday, November 10th. Today is December 10th. He did not return when he was supposed to, and I called missing persons. They have been searching for him and have not found him. I did not want to leave his wonderful video in this site just hanging and have you wonder why he has not responded. She mentions a particular user. Thank you for suggesting the GPS. I talked with him about using GPS for safety reasons. He just never seemed to want to use one. He loved just being out in the desert and finding his own way. I am aching with missing his physical presence. Please encourage all the solo hikers you know to use a GPS. And so that kind of gives you some insight into the person he was, just in terms of the risk taking and the overestimation of his own abilities. And I think also a little bit of that, what's that kid that John Krakauer wrote about in Into the Wild? Alexander.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Chris McCandless. He liked to pretend he was discovering the map. And he probably would have lived if he had used a map, but he wanted to feel like he was exploring.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I kind of feel like this guy was maybe a little bit of that same thing. And her follow-up comment, which I found elsewhere on another video, is essentially kind of lays out the situation. I think sort of gives us a pretty basic understanding of what happened to Kenny. So she said, your question, and this is again in response to another YouTube user, your question is very straightforward, and I hope to give you some of that same kind of straightforward response. He left at 6 a.m. for his about 1 hour drive to where he would park to start his hike. With all I have put together from conversations and where he was in life, I believe he took his own life. I could see his depression increase due to money issues. He had quit his job of 17 years about 14 months before he disappeared and was living on his retirement money. He was running out of money, had not created the money he had hoped to with doing a business of his own. He did open up and talk with me about his suicidal thoughts that he'd had for years, as he said, for most of his life. His father committed suicide with a gun when Kenny was in his early 20s. I don't know if Kenny left in the morning with this intent or if the decision was made after he was on his hike. I was with Search and Rescue when they got the okay from police to search his house. His gun was not there, so we know that he took his gun with him. He always took it on our camping trips and usually took it on long desert hikes. And just to jump in, he does have his gun in the Searching for the MK video. Mm-hmm. She goes on to say, what I found odd is that his video camera was left behind, but his regular camera was not found in his home. So we figured he took this photo camera. A search was done with his computer, and the history showed that he had recently been reading several articles on suicide, and he had the words "help me" written several times in one of his searches. He only said it to me once that if he decided to do it, he would not do it in his home, and that no one would ever find him. I'm only guessing, but I feel he said this because of the memories of finding his dad after suicide, knowing what that was like. So with the helicopter flying over and not a trace of Kenny or any of his things, I feel it would be very difficult to find him. He may have had a very specific area in mind, but as he said in his video, there were hundreds of caves and mines all over the area. This is merely my own opinion, and I could be wrong, but it is based on my many conversations with Kenny and the information gathered with Search and Rescue. Much more than I can write in a post. And she's responding to the person one of many people who claimed they were going to go look for him. She says, I'm glad you were planning on 2 weeks looking for him. It would entail much more than a 2-day hike. And no, you cannot be out there for 2 weeks without coming back into town for more supplies. Please be careful and let us know when you go so we can watch for updated news from you. And I will say, she seems quite sweet. I found her Twitter account, which was activated around this time, and it was really only ever used to respond to another hiker who claimed he was going to go look for her or look for Kenny. And she was, again, just encouraging him to be safe and please let her know when he got back, because it's an arduous hike and she wanted to make sure he was okay. So she seems like a genuinely, like a caring person.
Yeah. And, I don't know if you saw this, but there was some speculation that his sister had something like we would consider like a magic shop or something like that did like Reiki healing and sold crystals and those kinds of things. But it was a couple of years after he disappeared, I believe, the shop got broken into and the person only stole an iPad out of the place. And of course, there's video of it, and his mother decided that it was him. The sister was like, it kind of looks like him, but that was all she would ever say. But she didn't think it was him. And I think that fed into some of this idea that, we were mentioning that maybe he went out there and faked his death or something like that.
Right.
But I also understand that, people scoured over that video and ran it through different facial recognition software and things like that. And it didn't match Kenny. So, that's kind of a red herring, but it adds to that sort of mythos of like, oh, he found it or he, changed his identity and is, to escape his debt or something like that. But I really do think that, what you say is correct. And the girlfriend is sincere. The daughter, I think, did not believe that he would take his own life. But, if you lived through the experience he did of losing his father that way, you're going to protect her from that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I know this is a really sensitive topic, so I kind of dance around it sometimes, but, it's very hard for family members, and if either of you have been through this, please don't think I'm trying to talk down to you, because I'm not. But like, if it's hard for family members to reconcile that with the person they love. But as someone who has been at the edge of that decision, like there were 2 times I got close. And the first time, I had not started the night with that idea in my mind. So I went out of the house, I had my wallet, I had my phone, I had my keys, all the things you would leave behind if you weren't planning on coming back.
Right.
And I just started putting them in my shoes, right? Like that was my plan. And so, like, again, I could see someone, because if I had been found, it might not have been obvious that I had done it myself. And you might think, oh, it was an accident or someone drowned him.
Right.
But, because like, why would he take his phone? Why would he do X, Y? It just wouldn't make sense because, well, he was depressed, but if he was that bad, he would have said something to me.
Right.
Because it is hard to know what the people we love are going through, and I think it's sort of a way of coping to say, well, surely he would have talked to me. Like I would have seen the signs,
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who don't want to be a burden on other people, so they don't talk about how they're feeling.
Exactly.
100%. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one other detail, I can't source this other than I had seen it referenced on the Y-Files when they had done a video on Kenny. But, just like you're talking about with the email and the help me written over and over, apparently his recent search history was different ways to end his life.
Yeah.
So you've got all those things in there. Now, you could say someone who's, very intelligent and scheming would do those things too. So there's a digital trail that looks like I'm getting ready to end my life. But, I think if you do take the time to go look at some of his videos where he was pitching his inventions, and one of the things when he's selling his house, when he pitches that, he's offering himself with the house as your live-in Alice from the Brady Bunch.
Wow.
To help take care of everything, and like a housekeeper that's always around.
Right, come buy my house so I can live here with you.
Basically, yeah, and so it's the man was under a lot of stress.
Yeah,
obviously, and
sounds like he was getting desperate.
Yeah, he was. I mean, it really does sound like he was getting very desperate. You don't sell yourself with your house if things are okay.
Yeah, and that to me points towards there's very little chance of him restarting his life, because I think if he had that is, I think, something people still think is an easy thing to do. Mm-hmm. And I mean, try getting a job without especially if you've had a steady job for 17 years and you tried to retire, it didn't work out. You can't tell me that you're then going to go get the kind of job where they don't want your social security number.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like there's no way. I mean, yeah, okay, you're gonna get work on a like picking pumpkins or something. I mean, again, it's backbreaking work. I guarantee you that's not what he was doing for 17 years. He's not. It's a lot harder to start again now in the digital age than it ever has been.
True.
Again, you can do it, especially if you have a lot of money. Then it's easier, I'm told. But yeah, if you're broke, unless you're willing to adjust to a standard of living that is very different from what you've known, you're not going to do that.
Right, exactly. I mean, you would have to essentially steal somebody else's identity.
Yeah.
And then also be good at what they were good at.
Yeah.
For when you go to apply to a new job or something like that, so your skills match up. I mean, the amount, and I don't want to go off on my rant about how much we're tracked through everything these days. But we are, between our credit cards, our phones, all of these things, so much of us is documented through third parties that are easy to be accessible by places that are going to hire you, places are going to do a background search, law enforcement if they want to get to it, all of those things. It's not easy to suddenly become a new person anymore. 40 years ago, Brennen, did you read the old anarchist cookbook?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I mean, we all read that, right? And so
I did not.
Things was it taught you how to go get a library card without real identification. And then that allowed you to go get a driver's license.
Huh.
But basically it was how to game the identification system to create a new identity was one of the things it outlined. And go read that now and it sounds so quaint.
Oh, totally. And I think Abby Hoffman wrote that in 1968 or something like that. It's a 60-year-old book.
Yeah, exactly. Just hop on down to the local library, give them the name that you want, and then go use that as a form of identification to get something else, and then you can leverage that to a driver's license. I'm like, okay, great.
Yeah, like because you think about the actual, like, what would be involved in disappearing yourself, right? I mean, what would you need? You'd need money, you'd need a vehicle, you'd need transportation, you'd need somewhere to live, unless you're willing to just, you decide I'm going to go live on the street. But again, that's a real particular way of life.
Yeah.
Like, I remember when I was hitchhiking, you have to really be mentally tough, and it wasn't always, it wasn't always easy for me. But to stand on the side of the road and to have people look at you with sometimes with like undisguised hatred, because you need something from them, and you're just standing there with your thumb out, or you got a sign that says wherever it is you're going, right? And that I dug out of a dumpster, and and like, again, you're going to live your whole life like that after living in what looked like quite a nice little rancher style house in Las Vegas. That just seems really unlikely. Not impossible, but unlikely.
Unlikely. Yeah. I mean, I don't know, the thing that I could see him pulling off, but he would have to have money, is that move of disappearing either to South Central America, or
Costa Rica, Mexico, or something like that. Sure.
Yeah. But you still have to have a lot of money to go do that, because one, you got to get there and you got to have a place to live. But if you get there and you don't have an identity and you don't have funds, now you're working, at even a lower wealth value than you would here, getting paid to pick pumpkins, like you joked about. You're not going to be okay. And I don't think, based off the videos we saw, he was equipped for that.
No, he didn't seem like a think on his feet, kind of adapt kind of guy. Because you got to think too. Again, thankfully, I've never been in this situation, but if you're living down in somewhere in South or Central America and you run out of money, I mean, you're going to end up on the street, and I have to imagine you're going to stand out. And I just imagine that someone's going to deport you.
Yeah.
Unless you know how to stay off the radar, you're going to pop up on the radar of some official body, or just end up, dead in a gutter somewhere.
I was about to say, or end up dead. Yeah. Absolutely.
Like, I remember being down. I was this historian took me down to Juarez, long time back in 2008, actually, just as everything was kicking off.
Oh, geez.
And he told me, he said, I know the area. He said, we'll be fine as long as we stay out of the, we stay in kind of where we're going to stay, and we just not too stupid. And he told me I'm free to take a picture of pretty much anything. And then we just happened to be on one particular street. I pulled up my camera and he slapped it practically out of my hand. He said, no, not here. You can't take a picture here. And it didn't look like different than any other street. But he said basically this is one of the areas where prostitutes are known to frequent. And even if there's no girls around, if one of the guys who runs this area sees you taking pictures, he will come after you. And you just think, like, there's a million unspoken rules like this you would have to navigate being in a new place like that, and where you probably don't speak the language very well. And
how are you going to learn that? Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, it's going to go very bad. If they don't just beat the crap out of you or rob you, you're lucky, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because, a lot of those places, unfortunately, they know nobody's going to miss you either, and nobody's looking for you. So it's easier to just be done with you.
Yeah. I mean, look at the attitude of law enforcement in North America when a homeless person is victimized.
Right.
Imagine if you're not only just a homeless person, but you're not from the country.
Yeah.
There's just not going to be a lot of interest in, well, okay, this guy got a knife in his belly. Okay, well, that sucks, but we got other people's problems to worry about now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. My time when I was back in Thailand, you got pulled over by the cops all the time, and they would be like, "Hey, you don't have your helmet on. It's a 2,000 baht fine. You can just pay me."
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and so really there was no fine. You just paid them, and if you didn't have money, then you're really in trouble.
Yeah.
And you can imagine somebody like Kenny being there with no resources, not knowing what's going on, and he wouldn't last very long, and with stuff like that happening.
No, I know a guy who got hit by a truck in Thailand on his motorbike.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. And he was in bad shape. Like, we're talking open, what is it called? Is it fracture? The fracture comes through the skin. I can't remember the name.
Oh, okay.
But really bad shape. But he was way out in the hills. Like, he was not near a city. So they just sent him to a rural hospital. His wound was just open to the air.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for the fact that he had a brother who was fairly wealthy, relatively speaking, who was able to fly there, take him to a city, and get him set up in a hospital that basically had the resources to deal with his situation, he would have died of some kind of sepsis in that hospital. And again, that's just one of 1,000 ways to die when you're poor and far from home.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Damn. Well, getting back to Kenny, I mean, I feel like, yeah, there was probably no truth to that M cave. I mean, we can't say with 100% certainty, but the fact that he never took a picture, didn't record where it was, and then, obviously his girlfriend said he left his camera home.
Yeah.
He obviously was not going out there to film it. So although it's an interesting possibility, and we can't completely rule out that it existed, I would venture to guess it probably never existed. He was just telling an interesting story, and then got his feet held to the fire, and then had a kind of like maybe that also helped push him over the edge. Who knows?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Like, from what I understand, some of the people on YouTube were pretty cruel to him. I don't. Again, I haven't seen the comments because that channel is gone, but it wouldn't surprise me.
So. And I'll add to it a little of disgust here. People went out trying to find the M cave afterward, and there have been folks that have claimed that they found it, in one condition or the other. One of the guys that found it in his video goes in the mouth of the M cave and finds an Area 51 sign, do not trespass, what have you. And then later he goes back to it again, and now the sign is posted outside and the cave is, got some wires across the front of it or whatever. But when you see the video of him like pulling the sign out, it looks like a novelty sign, not, and you're like, you jerk, you're staging this to like kind of build your own clout and also like kind of add to the mythology. It's so disingenuous, Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, I found a video from another channel. I won't specifically name it, but they did this something similar. They said, I found the cave, and it in no way resembles anything that he said, because in his second video, Kenny says, "Oh, it was the size of me, but it was M-shaped."
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that itself doesn't make a ton of sense. But setting it aside, what they found is they had to crawl and kind of drag themselves in there, and they pointed to some horizontally oriented rocks, and they said, "See, they tried to seal it up. They're trying to keep it. They started to seal it up." I mean, you're telling me that the combined might of the U.S. military started to seal up this cave and then got bored, like me trying to write? Like, come on, guys, come on.
Yeah, exactly. That wouldn't be that hard for them to do.
No, that's it. So yeah, I agree. It's pretty gross, and it like we were saying this before the call. There is so much real high strangeness that you don't have to lie about stuff, and making creepypasta out of people's lives and their tragedies is a really crappy thing to do.
Yeah,
it really is.
But people get. They get it's this wish fulfillment thing. Like, they want that to be real. They want that M-shaped cave to be real. They want, aliens to be abducting us, even though they may not think it's great. They want it to be true because it gives them some sense of control in the world. It makes them feel like they're on the right track. It makes them feel like, well, at least I understand what's going on. And in some cases, it's just, oh, look, I'm special. I found the cave.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and it's tough because, because the paranormal is a real thing, you can't force it. And I know that's a pain, right? Because you want to have an experience. You want to have something happen. But in my experience, the people who really try and brute force this stuff are the ones who never experience anything.
Yeah. Aside, but to add to that, I've got a friend that's been trying to she's been having issues with all of her magical practices. And when I talked to her about it, she was basically doing something, waiting 2 days, feeling like it wasn't working, and then go doing it again. And then feeling like it was messing it up more, and then go doing it again. And I'm like, dude, you're spiraling. You realize that, right?
That is the danger of lust for result.
Was exactly it. Yeah. And I'm like, what if you just stop and leave it alone now that you've done this thing, instead of feeling like it's not working? And even better than that, just think about some positive things for yourself, and then come back to one of these things and, do your ritual or spell or whatever you're working on, and then leave it alone.
Yeah.
That's very important. When you start poking and prodding at all this stuff, it goes away, or it gets worse, not the way you want it to be.
I know when I used to be out at night quite a bit, driving around, taking pictures. And I still do it, but a lot less than I used to. And there would be times, and it was always when I was in my worst mental headspace, there would be times where I would go to places that I knew were not great places to be, because quite often that's when you could feel something. There was there were people that bad things would happen. There were people who were not great hanging around there. In fact, one of those spaces that I used to go to that had a very particular feel is where there was what you might call a smiley face drowning.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But it was always it was like I needed to prove to myself that I might suck right now, but I can still connect with this thing out there. And it was the worst possible thing, but I was reaching out to it anyways because it was something. And I just feel like that's almost always how it goes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When you need it, when you need that validation is when the worst things reach out from the dark for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So speaking of those murders, I did find some updates on the Brian Schaefer case.
Okay.
Now, this is a case that people are really fascinated with. And I remember when I had David on to talk about this, the thing is, nobody really looked that deep into it. I think because it seemed like a weird story. And so I was like, well, did you go to this place? Did you get anyone to go there and check and make sure? Because the idea with Brian Schaefer's case is he was in, see, I have the new information. I don't know if I have the original information.
He was in Columbus.
Yes. Okay. It was in Columbus, Ohio. He was in a bar, and supposedly he never left the bar. And no one's ever seen him since. And the argument was there was only one exit, and they went over it thoroughly, and he never left. So this, let me find this channel here. It's called Eyes on Crime, and they did some updates on this. And I wish it was an article because it would be easier, so I tried to just make some notes that they pulled up here. So the Ugly Tuna is where he was. He was seen entering the bar at 1:15 a.m. He's seen again at 1:55 a.m. chatting with two women outside. And they said, well, there's only the one way in and out. And this person says there was a fire exit and a service elevator likely intended for employees, but still a potential route out of the structure. And it also has several businesses, each with its own doors, meaning somebody could have slipped out through another establishment and never been noticed. And a side door that was occasionally flipped out through another establishment. I think that's supposed to be slipped out. There was a side door that was propped open by patrons stepping out to smoke, which is another way somebody could have come in or out at any point without ever being caught on camera. So the idea that he disappeared without being caught on camera is kind of meaningless because there were quite a few ways. There was also an area with construction being done. And I remember when I had David on, I'm like, did you check to make sure there were no others? And he didn't. It was just taken for granted by him and a lot of other people that there was no way he could have left the building. And that, of course, makes it seem really weird, like, where did he go? But when you realize there were a lot of exits, there's a lot of ways, because it seems weird that any building would not have multiple exits. The other thing they discovered is, well, they discovered a few things.
Well, hey, pause real quick, Seriah.
Yeah.
That would even be against fire code.
Yeah, right.
There's definitely other exits. That's
exactly.
It wouldn't be open. Anyway, sorry.
So they're talking about how the video has gone over, and this was in, I don't remember what year, maybe 2006, something like that. Yeah, I think it was early to mid 2006. So they looked at the video, but the video from 2006 on security cams is not very good. Only one cop reviewed it. He threw it up on a projector to project it on a wall. Well, when you do that with poor footage, it doesn't make it easier to look at.
Yeah.
It's just going to make it more blurred and indistinct. So, what does it say here? One officer spent hours reviewing footage on his own time, and he claimed to have identified every single person who entered the bar that night, and every one of them that exited, about 30 people that exited through the doors. Several others slipped out without appearing on camera, so that's important too. So people came in and didn't go out, so it wasn't just him. In September 2006, his girlfriend called his phone and it actually rang. Others were able to replicate this, but nobody ever answered. The call pinged the cell tower in Hillard, Ohio, about 14 miles northwest of Columbus. Also, the DNA they used was not... what is it? They admitted in 2018, police discovered a huge mistake in Brian's DNA, and his father's DNA collected back in 2006 had been mislabeled by Columbus police and were never entered into CODIS, which is what the missing persons database. If Brian's remains have been found before then, they would not have been identified because they were mislabeled. And that's not the only error in the case. So they had more surveillance footage. So HLN, which I think was a news site, aired additional footage from different angles and took screenshots, and it says it raises serious questions. In one moment, Brian looks over his shoulder, clearly aware of the nearby police, and then drops something into his girlfriend's purse. It's subtle, but it's on camera, and you can see it. They showed the video of this. And more shockingly, there's a man walking down the stairs who looks a lot like Brian. Same body type and hair and same clothes. And again, they'd show it, and yeah, it looks exactly like him. It's just from behind because it's a different camera angle. Brian's credit card debt, nearly $15,000, was completely paid off 1 month before he vanished. But there's no trace of the payment in his bank account. And what's hard to explain is that Brian didn't even have a job at the time and was also receiving monthly checks from $425 from the same account with sequential check numbers, and once made a cash deposit of over $5,000 in an ATM in Pickerton, Ohio. So where was this money coming from, and who was sending it?
Well, and then the phone thing is funny, too, that it rang and pinged different places. Like, obviously, somebody was paying that bill.
His girlfriend was.
Okay.
Yeah, his girlfriend kept the phone bill paid in case she could ever get through to him. But until that point, for months, she'd call it every day and it would go right to voicemail. And then suddenly it started ringing. And it rang for, I think they said about 6 hours. And then it started going back to voicemail again. And then the next day they tried again and it rang for like 12 hours as different people tried it. And then it went back to going to voicemail.
Okay. Well, that changes what I was thinking then.
That he would have had to pay the phone bill somehow?
Yeah, well, that's exactly where I was going.
Yeah.
I was like, well, how does his phone even work if he's disappeared?
Yeah,
somebody's paying that.
Yeah, she paid it, hoping that he would answer at some point.
Yeah, I was just like, auto draft eventually is going to catch up with that.
But I recommend just looking up Brian Schaefer on YouTube under Eyes on Crime, on the channel Eyes on Crime. Because it's about a 23-minute video, and it gives you the basic info, and then it gives you all this other stuff that they found out. And shows you the videos and stuff as well, so you can see it yourself. So Brian, I mean, to me, Brian does sound like someone who wanted to disappear.
Yeah.
So, and yet he had a $4,500 check for tuition that was never cashed, but also never given to the university. So he had $4,500 that he could use for such a thing, but it was never touched.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But he was obviously getting money, though. That's the thing.
Yeah. That's where my brain went. I was wondering if, whoever was giving him money, or maybe it was his money from another, Social Security number or something he'd set up. He just wasn't worried about it. Maybe he was getting that much or felt like he had that much waiting for him.
So according to some information I've been finding while you guys have been chatting, and now, of course, I'm not able to verify this. I don't have enough time.
Yeah.
But according to a poster on Reddit, again, slightly specious, however, they claim that the former lead detective on the case from Columbus Police Department, Sergeant John Hurst, who is now retired, gave an interview to someone named Kelly Bruce. And in this, apparently his phone was turned on after his disappearance, but it wasn't just the Hilliard pings that you're talking about. Supposedly, it pinged a number of places where he had been, that kind of in and around that area.
I think I did hear this, yeah.
Yeah, so there was a ping in Hilliard 6 or 7 months after his disappearance because his girlfriend Alexis was calling him, but it was located near the area where he disappeared. And apparently he had fought with his friend that night, which I guess was not uncommon, him and a fellow named Clint. And I guess it was not uncommon for them to fight when they were drinking together. But they're speculating that he basically had a fight with this guy and left through the side of the building where construction was happening.
Yeah. Which, it makes this case a lot less mysterious when you get some more of this info. And I remember when I first put this show up, someone from that area was like, no, there's lots of exits from that building.
Yeah, and the other thing is I noticed in an article in the Lancaster Eagle Gazette, it actually says Brian was seen in a surveillance video at the Ugly Tuna after entering the bar, then stepping outside.
Yeah.
Hearst, this is a detective, Hearst said police believe Brian went back inside the bar and there is no video evidence of him leaving. So they believe he went back inside, but there is no video. They did not see him go back inside.
Oh, interesting.
Now, yeah, it could just be, incorrect wording, but that seems significant to me.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, the video they showed on this YouTube video did look like him. I mean, they were absolutely, it was a positive ID of him because he looks at the camera. And then later, the person going down the stairs, he's dressed exactly the same. He has the same hair. He has, it's like, yeah, that's, you put them side by side, it's him.
Right.
And he's leaving. So grainy footage, but still enough to tell. And if it was, I mean, because that's the other thing. If this guy just did this blown up on a giant screen, he may have thought he identified all these people, but who knows? I mean, that's anyone who's played around with video like that should know that, the bigger you blow it up, the less detail you get, the harder it actually is to identify something. Because you'll look at a video on like a telephone or something and be like, can't believe I just called it a telephone on a phone. And it'll look like, oh, that's pretty clear. Like you take a picture and you go, oh, that looks pretty good. Okay. And then you look at it on like a giant computer screen. You're like, oh, it's kind of blurry.
Yeah.
But you can't see that on the little screen because it's sharper. It's smaller. So you'd almost want to watch it on a smaller screen to identify these people because it's not going to distort as much.
Mm-hmm. You mean to tell me I can't just like tell my computer to enhance the image over and over and it's going to be clear?
I mean, there is software
watched the accountant too. It suggests you can. I don't know.
What was that?
I just watched The Accountant too, and it suggests you can just say enhance and you get there. So
you could probably do it more now than you could back then. But
that's fair.
And there's plenty of software out there that is like, oh, it'll enhance your image, except most of it doesn't do a very good job.
Yeah. And
it certainly doesn't just do it because you say enhance image. Now, what the military has, who knows? Maybe.
And apparently, this Sergeant Hearst has also admitted in a CNN special about 3 years ago that there was one dumpster outside the tuna that was not able to be searched prior to it being collected.
Oh.
Huh.
And that was taken to a landfill in Tennessee.
Oh, wow.
So, again, if he was attacked when he left the bar and there's 100 reasons, you could be attacked.
Yeah.
Leaving a bar, right? I mean, I have been, I'm a giant coward, but, because I have, autism and my face doesn't move very much. People think I'm tough. And I've been a number of times accosted just for no apparent reason. So, I mean, even if he got jumped and something went wrong and they dumped him, that's one of those things. It's simple, but sometimes the simple things are what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't think there's anything paranormal about this case.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And a lot of people want it to be because for some reason they want these missing people to have paranormal things going on. But yeah, with this, it seems like the more information, we may never find this guy. He may have intentionally vanished. He may have been killed. But the idea that he went into this bar and never came back out seems to be highly unlikely.
Yeah, at this point, it's a great story more than it is sort of a viable explanation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, go ahead, Brennan.
No, please go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you have him going in and then don't see him exit, you get the idea that he went through a portal or something like that, time slip, what have you. And then you also kind of have that Alisa Lamb sort of, aspect to it too, where, your brain starts to fill those things in like, oh, maybe he was in distress and did some weird things around there and, went out the back and accidentally ended up somewhere he couldn't get out of or whatever,
Yeah.
So it's, it when you take out the details of nobody saw him leave the bar, it gets really, you can start crafting that mythology around it. Because the stories like that have happened are so compelling.
Yeah.
But when you add like, oh, there's plenty of ways to get out of that place. He and his friend fought a lot. You walk outside and your name is Brennen, and they mistake you for Brennen. And I mean, it just that makes it a lot more like, oh, this could be a pretty mundane experience. Unfortunately, that ended in terrible consequences for him.
Yeah, we got to take a break. We'll be right back. Quick mid-show break here and recommendation. So the contact info
wheredidtheroadgo.com. Everything's there. Social media, all the shows back to the very first one. And you can sign up to be a Patreon. And if you do that, you get the shows a few weeks early. You get it commercial free. Plus, you get extra segments with almost every show. And some extra special stuff thrown in as well. So, wheredidtheroadgo.com. You can also just give us a donation. I have a link to my link tree there. A link to my link tree, which will get you to all the other stuff I do. My photography, my music show, The Last Exit for the Lost, things like that. So all that can be found there on that link tree. And as for a recommendation, I started listening to a podcast, and I don't remember where I found this. It's called Before the Tone. I kind of feel like it should be After the Tone because it's the narrative structure, much like Mabel, is a series of voicemails. Mabel's a little more artistic about it. This is a little more story-ish. It's really, really good. Very Lovecraftian, very weird, just weird sci-fi horror. There's only one season so far, and that ended earlier this year, I believe. Let's see, the last episode, there's 13 episodes. Oh, no, it ended October last year. Since then, they've put up a bunch of other podcasts, some of which were also exceptionally good. The weird thing about this is that it is a sci-fi horror podcast, but they particularly start, the first tag they start with, and this really honestly shouldn't bother anyone, is that they start with queer sci-fi horror. And maybe that's why it wasn't coming up in my recommendations. But the thing about that's kind of like saying, hey, that metal band has a bunch of white guys in it. Because with all the audio fiction I listen to, probably 80% of it has LGBT characters in it. One of the biggest ones out there, Welcome to Night Vale, the main character's gay. So I feel like it's almost hurting them to put that at the beginning because it's probably orienting it toward recommending it to people who specifically seek out, quote, queer sci-fi horror. But the other ones that they recommended also tend to do that. And I'm thinking that's why they never came up with my recommendations, which is unfortunate because they are phenomenal. I absolutely love Before the Tone. I'm partway through another one that they recommended. So, I recommend checking it out. Obviously, it really was a pretty cool podcast. For that matter, check out Mabel, too, if you haven't already. It's very Fae-oriented. The end of it's kind of a little weak. It kind of falls apart at the end. I don't think they really knew what to do with it. Also, lesbian main characters. But again, that's just kind of standard for audio fiction, at least for sci-fi and horror. I don't know about other forms of audio fiction, but it is a very common thing in audio in sci-fi horror audio fiction. So like I said, it's kind of like saying, hey, that metal band has a bunch of white guys in it. Yeah, really? Well, that's shocking. I mean, it's just kind of the commonality, really. The plurality, maybe that's the right way of putting it. So, but I do think that it hurts the way they podcasts get recommended, and that's unfortunate because it's great. So Before the Tone is my recommendation for you for this week. Now back to the show.
So I'm here with Brennen Storr and Saxon Supra Williams, man.
I'm so used to listening to the show, Seriah, that I was waiting for the mid-show break and the picks.
Sorry, you'll have to wait till later. Sometimes I don't have good recommendations, and I'm like racking my brain going, I want to give a recommendation, but I haven't seen anything or heard anything recently that really stood out. And then I start looking through old stuff.
Fear Daily. Just listen to Fear Daily for all your daily horror fiction needs.
There you go.
There you go.
So I did want to mention Alisa Lamb real quick, since you brought it up before the break.
Okay.
Someone had actually left a comment on Spotify might have been on the last show we did. And this came from NW Skeptic 89, and he said, David Paulides is an absolute jerk. He once said that Alisa Lamb's body was found without blood. I simply asked in the Facebook group where he got that information because I had never heard that. I wasn't criticizing. He messaged me privately, was talking crap and threatening to sue me. And that was just the first time.
Oh, my God.
Man, I used to stump so much for missing 411 over on Ghost Story, guys, and I feel like such a tool. the more I learn about the series. Again, I think there are anomalous disappearances. I believe pretty strongly in some of the smiley face stuff, not all of it, but I think there's something there.
Yes.
But just David is just, God, he just makes it hard.
But so the Alisa Lamb thing too, I mean, part of what makes the Alisa Lamb case so weird, on top of just the obvious, is the fact that they messed with the footage. Like the police messed with the footage before they released it. They sped it up. They took the time codes out. They did just little things that don't make any sense at all.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think it, and that just really obviously muddied the waters, because I don't want to be dismissive, but it seems like a fairly simple case based on everything I've read.
I mean, it's simple, but also weird. Like we don't know. Like I know, what's his name? John Lorden. On his channel, he did a show on her, and he found that she met with two people in the lobby who like had this mysterious meeting, and there was like some object exchanged and stuff. And it's like, yeah, it seems like she probably just had a mental illness and wasn't taking her medication. And who knows why she got into that tank, or if someone put her in the tank. But there were some other things he found that also, like, we don't have enough context to know what was really going on. But he also was able to discover that, hey, she was staying in another room prior to that, and she was acting kind of crazy. So it's like, okay, so this is not as simple as, again, the spooky, like, girl plays the elevator game and then ends up dead type of thing.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I read the book Gone at Midnight by Jake Anderson, which sort of dissects some of the stuff about Alisa's death. And of course, I've seen the Netflix series. And this is another one that seems to me, this again, like you said, this is a young lady who had an established history of depression and depressive thoughts.
Yeah.
And was known for going off her meds, and when she did go off her meds, she would hide. She would find places to hide. This was part of her thing, And the roof was not all, because the whole thing has been that, well, the roof was locked and you couldn't get. That has just been shown to be not true.
Correct.
And so the fact that did she go up to the roof again intending to climb into the thing and drown? Probably not. But did she climb in on her own? Probably.
Yeah.
And it just may not have occurred to her until too late that, oh man, I can't get out of here.
Yeah.
But I mean, and the other thing I think works against the clear narrative here is this thing I've noticed when I research situations like the Kennedy assassination, right? Like I've read so many books about the Kennedy assassination. And the problem is that when you're looking at it, most of the time our scope is very narrow.
Yeah.
So we just look at an event, but when something important happens or important to us, we expand that scope to try and look for extra context to make sense of it. And the problem is there is so much weird stuff happening at any given time, things that maybe don't make sense without a lot more information, that you're suddenly looking at all these different data points and going, oh man, she talked to two people outside. Well, I mean, probably, there were other people staying there.
Sure.
And
those people, I don't think I can't remember. I know John talked about it last time he came on the show or so, whenever we covered the Alisa Lamb case. But I don't remember the details. It's been too long. Yeah.
And so, the problem is, like, you start to, everything kind of takes on this sinister cast because the central event is itself sinister.
Yeah.
And it then gets hard to, like, pick things apart. Like, for example, there's a fellow in England back, I want to say in the 80s or the 90s. They call him Margate Man because he's a Japanese fella in the town of Margate in the UK. And he rented a room in a guest house, paid cash, wrote the name they got for him on the registration is completely incorrect. And he committed suicide with a prescription antidepressant that is not available in Japan, or was not available in Japan at the time, and was theoretically prescription only in the UK. But the box he has no prescription on it. He had no identification, nothing on him. He is still unidentified. And when you start, my wife works with an organization that looks into this stuff. And when you start expanding it out, you're trying to find all these things, and you start trying to just like shoehorn things in to fit, and you're trying to draw conclusions from, in this case, very little evidence. I mean, with Margate Man, he had this drug, but he didn't have a prescription for it. So did he buy it on the street? Well, if he bought it on the street, he's probably not from Japan, because how does a Japanese person know where to buy street drugs in London?
Right.
But you're still kind of making suppositions on suppositions. And I kind of think with the Alisa Lamb case, I think it's sort of similar. I mean, again, the Cecil Hotel, have you guys ever been there?
No.
Okay.
No, I never have.
I've walked past it. It's like the Eye of Sauron. That place is haunted as hell. I didn't even realize I was about to walk past it, to be honest with you. I was tooling around downtown LA back in 2019. And all of a sudden I just thought, man, what am I feeling right now? And I looked up and it's right across the street. And walking past it was like someone, because my psychic awareness was really active during the early days of Ghost Story Guys, because we were recording and I was constantly working in a deeply haunted building. But after we moved out of there, after I lost that job and kind of things changed, my awareness really kind of sealed back up. Walking past the Cecil was like having it sandblasted open again.
And if you're already in a depressive state and you're in a place like that gives off that type of vibes, that's probably not helping you.
100%. And like, I'm always hesitant to sort of prescribe real like paranormal stuff to real life tragedies, but I would have no problem believing that place did not help her mental state.
Yeah.
You could not pay me to walk in there. I know I have a listener who lives in LA, keeps saying, oh man, next time you're in the city, we got to go to the Cecil. And I keep going, yeah, man. Okay. And not for all the tea in China.
So, I mean, again, I think we have a case of something that does look weird on first glance, but there seem to be practical explanations when more data is added to it. Now, some of the early cases that David covers, let's see if I can reach the book through the cat. Hang on. There's a cat here who apparently wants attention.
They do that, I'm told.
So the first, I decided to take the Western New York book and look up the first case. And the first case was a singular one. And there's not really there was no additional info. Like when I Googled it, it's the case of, no, this one's Bart Schuyler. And is this Bart here? Oh, no. Okay, so Bart, I know which one Bart is. Okay, so Bart was a hunter. And Bart's case is a little bit weird. Like, I'm not gonna dismiss that. It is a little bit strange. And so this is what he starts the book with, and this one definitely holds up as an unusual case. This was in 2004. And he was 49. He disappeared September 14th, 2004. And this was in the Yukon Territory. So not a place that people don't disappear in, but this guy was one of those people who was really good at being out in the wilderness. Mm-hmm. Without going through all the details here, so the official explanation is that he was probably eaten by a grizzly bear, but he was someone who was very aware of this stuff. So it says, he disappeared. And then on October 3rd, Mounties, Yukon conservation officers, and civilian volunteers flew back to the area to begin a more detailed grid search. At first, they found little but bear and wolf tracks. Then the searchers spotted a baseball cap, camouflage pants, a camera, part of a skull, and just a few small bones. All of these items were 60 meters from the bow and spruce tree. The teeth in the skull allowed subsequent identification of the remains as being Bart Schuyler. There wasn't much more of his body found. Under what happened to Bart Schuyler, since there was quite a bit of grizzly scat in the area, it fueled speculation that Schuyler had been unexpectedly killed and eaten by a bear, as happened with the famous Timothy Treadwell, whose death was captured in a documentary by Werner Herzog in 2006 called Grizzly Man, based on video footage that Treadwell and his girlfriend had been filming. I didn't even know about that. Some of the bear scat samples had some bone fragments, but no fiber. In Treadwell's case, not only were human remains found in the bear's stomach contents that had killed him, the bear that had killed him, I see what they're saying, and his girlfriend, but also large amounts of their clothing. Most of Schuyler's clothes were never found. The searchers and friends were skeptical it was a bear attack that had taken Bart out. First, there was no sign of a death struggle, no vegetation or ground, and the ground had not been disturbed. The remains were found in a little patch of sparse spruce lying on the moss, and if a bear killed him, this would be unusual, as they usually bury their kills in a cache. The remains of Treadwell and his girlfriend were found in such a cache after they were killed, but there was no cache anywhere in the area that searchers could locate, because that doesn't mean there wasn't one. But the Vancouver pathologist who examined Schuyler's remains found no tooth punctures in his skull, nor indications of scratch marks from teeth. When bears attack people, they almost always go for the head.
They sort of like pull it down. It's pretty gnarly.
Even if he started off playing dead, a recommended tactic for surviving a grizzly bear attack, Friends said he would have known that if the animal continued the attack, the only chance for survival would be to fight back. And generally speaking, a bear attack is prolonged and violent. A friend said, I think the least likely scenario is some kind of surprise encounter, but it's hard to imagine having a bear sneak up and get him. Almost everyone who knew Schuyler believed he was too good a woodsman, too alert while in the forest to have a bear catch him by surprise. Bart's hat, for example, was completely undamaged. If a bear got him, it's even harder to imagine the animal killing him without leaving signs of a struggle on a site covered with soft, easily disturbed moss. An attack goes on for a long time. The audio tape of Treadwell's death goes on for many minutes, according to the sounds of him and his partner being eaten alive.
Yeah.
The baklava contained little blood and hair in his pants, even less. If a bear attacks a man, it won't remove his pants without them being shredded and soaked in blood. Usually bears grab the end, especially when attacking from behind, causing profuse bleeding. So why wasn't the balaclava blood-soaked? Others disagree and say even for an experienced woodsman, a predatory bear could sneak up and deliver a fatal attack. The plastic container that held his food had not been disturbed. The bear experts say that if a grizzly had killed Schuyler, the same bear likely would have gone to the camp, given the proximity, and eaten the canned food. Everything points to evidence related to scavenging and not caused by a direct violent attack. So no one really knows. Apart from bear attack, potential explanations include wolf attacks, but these are even rarer than bear attacks, and there was no physical evidence on the ground, and the bag he was sitting on was untouched with no blood. Natural death from a heart attack or brain aneurysm within the body, later taken apart by scavenging animals. At 49 years of age at peak physical fitness, it seems unlikely, but it is possible. And then the last one just says murdered by the Russian mafia.
Oh, God.
Okay.
Apparently his wife was Russian. I couldn't find anything else about it, but his wife was Russian, and he occasionally did work for the Russians. Like,
I love how the idea that if you work for anyone from Russia, you are just in bed with the mob. Like, by that logic, the guy who composed the music for Ghost Story Guys is my connection to the Russian crime families.
So this is a weird case. I mean, we don't have a clear-cut reason why this guy should have died. And he could have, people drop dead of brain aneurysms all the time. Mm-hmm. And it's not something that you generally even know you have. So it doesn't matter what kind of shape you're in. And look at Marty Garza. Marty is in physically good shape. Yes, he's older than 49, but he was out riding his bike when he had a serious heart attack. Yeah. So this stuff is not always obvious. We're assuming that because this guy was such an outdoorsman, so physically active, that it wasn't a physical ailment that killed him. But I mean, who knows?
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up. Let's see. It was from Seth Rogen's podcast called Storytime with Seth Rogen. He did, I think it was 2 shows with a guy named Doogie Dowler, and I believe that's right. That's the name of the show anyway. Oh, excuse me. That's the name of the mountain, the Ballad of Mount Doogie Dowler. But anyway, the whole interview is he has a friend who knows a guy that survived a grizzly attack.
Oh.
And so he interviews the guy that survived the attack. And this is an experienced outdoorsman, lives in, I believe he's in Alaska. I don't think it was in Canada. And had gone to, a local island near where he lived to go out into the woods. And I think he had a bicycle with him or something. I can't quite remember that part. But anyway, it sounds awful. And the guy obviously has a lot of trauma from it. And to Seth Rogen's credit, he's very careful and, allows the guy room and doesn't make jokes when he shouldn't.
Right.
But, the guy gets quite graphic with what happened to him and how he ended up surviving. But basically, he drugged himself several miles with lots of his organs not really inside his body anymore.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it's just, it's really interesting and awful to listen to. But they bring up Grizzly Man in there as well, kind of leading up to the story, if I remember right. And, I think is the audio from his death in the movie?
No,
I've never seen
Herzog is depicted listening to it.
Okay, that's right.
They never play it. And he tells, I think it's Treadwell's sister or his mother, he asks her if she's listened to it. She says she hasn't. He says, don't destroy this. This shouldn't exist.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. That's right. but yeah, these are not quick things. And so, yeah, I get the perspective that, bear could just come up and kill you with a single bite kind of thing, but that's just not what these things do.
Yeah, it seems unlikely it was a bear. Oh, by the way, that what I read came from strangeoutdoors.com.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, that, I don't know. This sounds weirder,
Yeah, it's definitely a weird case. It is the first one in the Western New York book. So there's nothing, I don't think I feel like the first couple of books, David was doing a better job of researching these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think once he kind of developed his theories, and I think once it really started to take off, I think then, like a lot of this stuff, right? You need it to keep going because you need it to be your thing.
Yeah.
You need it to keep paying off.
He compares it to the deaths of Charles McClure and Robert Winters from Crater Lake and Geraldine Huggin in Ontario. And this is David from the Western New York book. So in the Charles McClure case, they had found his pants and socks. That's it. Just like in Bart's case, they never found the majority of his other supplies, his shirt or his coat. Also, one major item missing in both cases were boots. Both of these men's boots were missing from the area, yet in both cases the pants were left. There are no grizzly bears in Oregon, yet Charles was completely consumed. In the Geraldine Huggin case, investigators found her pant legs pulled inside out. American Indian trackers found human footprints in the area, although RCMP discounted their statements. I don't know why. They also found threads and bits of cloth from Geraldine's shirt. The physician who examined the clothing and the few remnants of Geraldine's stated that there was no blood on any clothing found, same as the other two incidents. There were a few tufts of hair found in the area which were believed to be where Geraldine died. So yes, these cases are unusual.
I should point out, too, that when you see something like the RCMP has dismissed, that doesn't mean anything.
Okay.
There was a disappearance in Victoria, BC in, I want to say 1993. I probably have the date wrong, but it was a young boy named Michael Dunahee. And there's a podcast called Island Crime that recently did a big recap on his case because additional information has come to light. And it seems like a witness who saw him being taken spoke to Victoria Police, which is different from RCMP, but they're all, the mentality is very much the same. They saw him being taken and she was dismissed as just trying to help.
Wow.
So I honestly think, now I have friends who are in the police in Canada, so I don't have a problem. This is not an attack, but I think we do have a problem with police in Canada being very unwilling to listen to the public.
I don't think that's just Canada.
That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a book that was supposed to come out called The Good of the Force, or For the Good of the Force, and it was meant to be an examination of the history of the RCMP, their sort of a frank accounting, and by a journalist who's very well regarded. Her name escapes me at the moment, but last I checked, it was just memory hold. The book was never released, and it's that kind of situation. There's not a lot of criticism that's welcome of the RCMP.
Well, also, American Indian trackers were the ones that found this, who are people who are more likely to be good trackers, but it might be also they got dismissed because they were indigenous.
That too. Yeah, that's not uncommon.
So the next case in here was Alma Hall, and Alma and Raymond Hall, 28 years old and 6 years old. And there's not a lot of information here. I literally could find the same article a few different times, and it says 350 search for missing mother, son, Albert Bay, June 13th. He lists the disappearance as June 9th, 1951. And it says more than 350 men in detachment of RCMP officers are carrying out searches and dragging operations for a mother and her son missing and believed drowned near Inglewood, 6 miles south of here. Police said that Mrs. Alma Hall, 28 of Saskatoon, and her son Raymond, 6, have been missing for 2 days from Was Logging Camp W near Englewood. Search parties are scouring the riverbanks and surrounding woods while police conduct dragging operations. The missing woman and her son were reported to have gone to Englewood on a vacation. She is reported to be the daughter-in-law of William Hall, barrister of Saskatoon. The missing woman's husband, Thomas, was employed at the Was camp. That's it. That's all I could find.
So I'm going to do a little bit of a dive on the newspapers here, see if we can find,
because it's an older case, but if there was a follow-up, it wasn't obvious anywhere.
Vancouver. Oh, interesting. So this was actually, they were from Saskatoon, but they were missing in Alert Bay, which is northern Vancouver Island.
Oh.
Yeah, this is from the Montreal Gazette, Thursday, June 14th, 1951. Alert Bay, BC, June 13th. More than 350 men led by an RCMP detachment today were searching for a mother and her son, missing and believed to have drowned near this northern Vancouver Island community. Police said Mrs. Alma Hall of Saskatoon and her son Raymond have been missing for 2 days from a logging camp where they had been on vacation. So that's interesting. So I'm just going to dial in a little closer on that. Now, it's interesting that it's Alert Bay, specifically on the island, because the northern part of the island is very sparsely populated and very it has an energy to it.
Okay.
And I actually know someone who worked in a logging camp on the island, a little bit south of where Alert Bay is. And they were visited by what they believed to be an alien craft.
Oh.
It was a remote logging camp, and a number of the men were visited by something they alternately described as a light or as a craft. So June 14th, rather, search for a mother and her 6-year-old son in the, experienced woodsmen are scouring the banks of the Nimkish River for Mrs. Alma Hall, 28, and her son Raymond, who disappeared about 7 p.m. and are believed to have been drowned. Mrs. Hall, wife of Thomas Hall, who has been employed at the camp for the past 4 years, and Raymond was last seen on a slippery and precipitous bank of the river near a waterfall. Searchers fear they may have slipped over the bank as they have been unable to find any trace of them entering the bush. And they dragged the river for 2 days, but I mean, if it's a fast-moving river, that's not surprising.
Yeah.
And she had been living, so I don't know where the Montreal Gazette got vacation. She had been living with her husband at this camp for 3 years.
Oh.
Aha.
Interesting.
So this is... Again, it up there, if it's moving fast, which it probably was, it is not. Especially if there was a waterfall, good luck. A friend of mine in the town of Salmon Arm, BC, in 2002, her father went missing. His bicycle was found next to the river. He was never located, and you can bet they dragged the river, and it didn't do them any good.
So this is less a strange disappearance and more probably just a sad disappearance.
I was going to say, this seems more like a tragic disappearance than it is anything.
Yeah. And you found more than I did. Like I said, I just kept finding the same article, or I'd find direct links to, David's material, which was basically what they said. He wasn't, embellishing it at all.
Yeah. I mean, I have the advantage of, my wife and I use a newspapers.com subscription for my research and for hers. So I've got the advantage of being able to go back there. But yeah, Alert Bay is a very remote place. So you're right on the water. So I don't think it would take long to get washed out to sea. The Nimkish River, it's isolated now.
Yeah.
To give you some sense of how isolated it is, to get to Telegraph Cove, which I've been to, which is near where these folks went in the water. It is a 6-hour drive from Victoria, and I would say for 3 of that, you are driving through just highway. There are no towns.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it is. And again, that's now. So imagine 70 years ago, how much more remote that would have been.
Yeah, wow. Well, we were out of time.
Oh, that went by fast.
It did. It went by really fast.
It did.
And this also marks the last time we will probably use Skype, since today is the last day Skype is going to exist.
The end of an era.
I'm kind of sad about that, because I've stuck with Skype this whole time because it's been free and worked decently for us. But, Microsoft is making it go away. So you guys were the end.
Well, glad to be here for the end of Skype.
Amen to that.
And where can people find you, Brennen?
You can find me talking over on the Ghost Story Guys podcast. You can hear my fiction stories. I'm the co-writer of the Fear Daily horror podcast over at feardaily.com and everywhere podcasts live. And you can find me. I'm on Instagram, Letterboxd, Blue Sky, and Threads as Largely the Truth.
All right. And Saxon, where can people find you hiding?
You can find me on Instagram under Super Inframan, and I'm trying out Blue Sky now. So you can probably find me on there too.
You're on Facebook too.
And here.
And here. All right. Thank you guys.
All right.
Thank you.
I want to thank all of my Patreons for their support and help keeping this show alive. It is because of you I can keep doing this, and I thank every single one of you. Special shout out, though, goes to you a special shout out to those of you pledging $10 or more a month. Greg Ross, Cherry Trapezoid, John Blackburn, Madeline J., Mark Smith, Marty Garza, Matt in Delaware, Allison Cook, Super Inframan, 36 Dingo, Tim, Matthew Sproul, Marthartha, Tyler Glimstead, Christine, Abby Allen, Patricia Giaquinta, American Rambler, Andrew Maines, Ann Witowski, Barbara Fisher, Beverly Williamson, Billuminati, Bright Rectangle, Charles Davis, Charles in Florida, land of the crazy incommunicable, Corey Nelson, Diane B., Empty K, Eric Citron, Eric Todd, History and Coffee, Jay, Jack Huntington, James Lindsay, Jim and Sophie, John Mattingly, John Bracken, Jonathan Frost, Carla Mahoney, Kevin Shrek, Cool Kitty, Kristen L., Laser Printer Jam, Lauren McLean, Linda from Michigan, Linz Jackson K., MJ Armstrong, Mark Shoemaker, Mark Brady, Mothman Bren, Automaton, Paul Jeffries, Perry Peters, Philosopher of Mirrors, Riker and Stark, Ron Dupre, Sam Sharon, Sasha McHale, Schmooples, Devourer of Mortal Souls, Stacy Sherwood, Strange Stories with the Seeker and Skeptic podcast, Tactical Therapist, Taylor Bell, Thunderboy, Varosh K, Victoria, Vincent Trewell, Will Cherry, Will Gebhard, Will Powell, Annabelle Smith, Caroline Walker, TDD Skunkworks, Colin Karras, Craig Sagastumi, and Matthew Brown. Thank all of you so much for the support. There's a lengthy Patreon segment to go along with this show, so if you're a Patreon, you'll be getting that very soon, and you can also just buy it. Actually, the Patreon is 2 hours. The Patreon is longer than this show was, so we really get in deep to stuff on that. You can just buy that as well at the Patreon site, but you're better off signing up and getting at least a month's worth of stuff for the same amount that you can buy the singular show for. Very easy to unsubscribe if you just want the one, if you just want to do it for 1 month or whatever. There's also yearly options, and you can also buy the extra episodes on iTunes now as well. So yeah, another 2 hours of Missing People with Brennen and Saxon as the Patreon. I want to welcome a couple of new Patreons, Paul Christian and Bong Bong. That's right, Bong Bong. I love the fun names. All right, so last week I started with a quote at the end of the show. Kind of took that from Night Vale. They have their proverb. I'm looking for actual quotes. And I'm going to use a quote from me, something that I've been saying for years that people seem to really like, and that's this. The universe has a sense of humor. You can either laugh along with it or be the butt of its jokes. It's your choice. See you next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.